welcome. We're glad you're here. Happy Wednesday. It's a beautiful day out. Hopefully, did you hold your breath like going from the car to here? It's like, I bet you didn't know we're all camping right now. It's just, right? This is what it feels like. But you're here. Our relaunch, first Wednesday of this kind of new, not the calendar year, new school year really. And we were discussing on like, what should we do? What should we talk about? And I had a number of people just say like, why don't you just go over your trip and like tell us about it? And I said, man, I took like 2,000 videos, so let's get started. I'm glad you buckle up. It's going to be a while. And so we're going to do that. We're going to go through. I was blessed enough, the church during the sabbatical, to let me go on an Israel and then Athens and Rome trip, and it was all kind of back to back. And I did the Jesus Trail thing, and we showed those videos. If you were in service, you got to see those. Did you guys see those? Was that fun? Right? That was like. You know what's so funny? Like we're doing the videos and then they get played and I'm like, I don't know if they liked them. They could be like, next, right? Like get moving on. And anyway, so the Jesus Trail was great. It was harder than I expected. It was better. It was like, there's so much obviously didn't make it in, but it was really, really incredible. A bucket list item. If you've never been to Israel, you just got to do the Israel thing. If you've been to Israel and want like a behind the scenes, like, all right, I want to know like, what is it? What is the land like? What are the people like? Then you got to do this. Like we walked Israel. We would show up at places and, with our backpacks and, mildly sweating and, profusely actually. And we'd be like, hey, we're trying to find this place, where's this? And they're like, well, just take that exit. And we're like, oh, no, we're not driving. And then they would just do this. Wait, you're walking? I'm like, well, yeah. Like, where'd you guys come from? We're like, Nazareth, which is at this point is like 30 miles away. And they go, you walked to this gas station from Nazareth? And we're like, yeah, wasn't so hard. And they're like, what are you stupid American? I guess it's like, what you can drive, and it was, so everywhere we went, it was almost like the same story. Because like, we just didn't, it was clear like something was wrong with us. And, but it was honestly, it was awesome. It was like 98 degrees every day and like no let up. It was amazing. But we saw no one on the trail because it was 98 degrees and like people don't go on this trail when it's 98 degrees. So we did that, but then we also spent our last day. So we did the Jesus Trail. We took a day of just relaxing. Honestly, I appreciate all of it. It sounds so flippant. Like we were just relaxing on the coast of the Sea of Galilee, just, dipping our toes in, just hanging out. And it's like, it sounds like, oh, it must be nice. But we were like pinching ourselves like, we're really doing this? And then the last day we went to Jerusalem because you can't go to Israel and not go to Jerusalem and go see Jerusalem. So we're going to go through Jerusalem. And here's what we're going to do. It's not just like, who was it earlier? Someone was like, oh, it's just going to be like Uncle Brandon's slideshow. Like, no, it's not going to be Uncle Brandon's slideshow. I just like, and this picture you'll see, and this picture. But what we're going to do is we're going to kind of follow the footsteps of Paul based on like the places that I got to go to. And we're going to look at what happened in Paul's life there. We're going to look at the scripture and say like, all right, when Paul was here, this is what happened. And then I'll show you, all right, this is what it looks like. This is like when we talk about Corinth, and Corinth was a big deal for Paul, you'll be able to see this is what it looked like. This is like where he was and where he preached. And so it should be really fun. I hope it was fun for me at least. And so I'm excited that you guys can kind of, by proxy follow along. And if anything else, it should at least stir up an appetite to say like, okay, I've never been over there. I need to go, right? As a church, we're hoping to plan a trip. We don't have dates yet. I'm hoping around fall-ish of next year. So we had one in the works planned, and then COVID came and that like stopped everything, and so that kind of put a halt on it. So it postponed everything by a few years, but Israel's back open and like tours are opening. So if you're thinking about this, even after tonight, if you're probably really going to be thinking about it, start thinking about, okay, next year, like the later half of next year, usually September, October is probably the best weather to do it. We'll probably, hopefully, be able to do a trip. So that's just a kind of that's like a teaser commercial. It's not like a real commercial yet, but it will be. So, okay, are you ready? Should we do this? Okay, so we're going to go through kind of in not in order of my trip, but in order of Paul's missionary journeys. And so we'll see kind of what city he went to. No, make sure this works. There we go. Okay, so here, Paul went on 3 missionary journeys and then one final journey that ended with his death. And so this is the first missionary journey. You can see it in blue. Up in the top left, that's that's Italy. You see the boot right there of Italy. So this is Mediterranean. To the bottom right, you see where it says Judea. That's Jerusalem. That's Israel and Jerusalem and that whole area. So his first missionary journey, you can see where he goes, right? I didn't visit any of the places he went to on his first one. His next journey, all right, this is missionary journey number 2. Little different than missionary journey 1, right? Few more miles he put on in his sandals. The 2 places that I specifically, he starts here in Jerusalem, right at the bottom right, and then he's going to travel all around Ephesus and the region of Galatia, like we just went through Galatians, that's this whole area. So he goes through Galatia and plants churches, at least 4 of that we know of. And then eventually he makes his way to Athens and then Corinth. And then he's going to make his way back and visit a few other places. So we're going to look at these places here in a second. Okay, a few years go by, missionary journey. Let me just try it. Did that work? Did I do that? Awesome. You guys ever watch Family Matters? I totally had like an Urkel moment right there, didn't I? It was like, did I do that? Like, that's immediately what came to mind. All right. Missionary journey number 3. So it's similar to 2. He's going to revisit a lot of the places he visited, a lot of the churches that he planted, and he's going to just come back and encourage them, right? They miss Paul, they love Paul, and so he shows up and visits a lot of the same places. He goes to Athens and Corinth again, and then he eventually makes his way back to Jerusalem. And then his 4th journey, this is not a missionary journey. This is where he gets arrested, and then he's on trial, and then he says the famous words, well, I appeal to Caesar, because he's a Roman. And then they say, all right, well, then to Caesar you will go. So now they got to start this journey that takes months to get him to Rome. And so he travels up across the sea and travels through. And when you read Acts, you see a lot of you read a lot about what happens at these places. He goes to Malta. Again, you can read about that in the book of Acts. And then he makes his way all the way eventually in Rome, where I got to go, which is amazing. And he'll, the end of Acts, he ends with Rome, but it doesn't end, it ends with him still alive, but eventually that's where his life comes to an end, in Rome. So here's all of Paul's journeys. If you're curious, I walked that much right there. 40 miles is right there. And so when you look at Paul and how much he traveled, I mean, it's almost unbelievable, right? I did this, 40 miles. I actually did 50 miles because, overachiever. And I know we got lost a lot. At the end, we had nice shoes and we got blisters and our feet are killing us. And we're like, man, these shoes they're already beat up. And I'm going, this was 50 miles. And he walked tens of thousands in sandals. It's unbelievable, just the amount of just effort of what it took to get us these letters was so much just physical work to travel, to get to all these places. So it's pretty unbelievable, it's pretty humbling, and it's pretty awesome that I just got to fly to them. It was great. Okay, so we start in Jerusalem, Paul in Jerusalem, and he's spent a lot of time there, but there's a few that specific references in the Bible that I want us to look at. Here's what we see in Acts 15. It says this: certain people came down from Judea to Antioch and were teaching the believers, unless you are circumcised according to the customs taught by Moses, you cannot be saved. Now, if you remember, we went through Galatians, and all of Galatians is about this. And almost to the point where you almost get tired of hearing about it, like, man, why do you, Paul, you keep talking about this issue? And here it is in Acts, the same issue. Because if you remember, circumcision is not about circumcision. It's about adding requirements to what it means to be saved. It's by grace after you convert and do a little bit of extra stuff, whatever the extra stuff is. And so they say you got to be circumcised according to how Moses, you got to submit to the law of Moses, and then you can really be saved. So what do? This brought Paul and Barnabas into sharp dispute and debate with them. Paul, if you can imagine, I mean, we read through Galatians, he doesn't respond well when this happens. I mean, he gets fiery. And he gets upset because they're changing the gospel. So, let's continue. So Paul and Barnabas, again, if you're going to have two guys like get in the argument and the debate, like Paul's the guy. You're like, hey, Paul, you ready? We got an issue here, right? They're talking about circumcision. Oh yeah? Let me at him. Who is it? Awesome. I'm glad Paul's on our side. So Paul and Barnabas were appointed, along with some other believers, to go up to Jerusalem to see the apostles and elders about this very question. The church sent them on their way, and as they traveled through Phoenicia and Samaria, they told how the Gentiles had been converted. Again, this was new. It's just Jews that Jesus came to save and to fulfill the Old Testament, and now there's Gentiles who are allowed in too. So it continues. This news made all the believers very glad. When they came to Jerusalem, they were welcomed by the church. Now this is Paul and Barnabas and the apostles and elders, to whom they reported everything God had done through them. So they're like, all right, we've been on these journeys. Let us tell you what we've been seeing, right? Okay. Now this is in Galatians. If you remember in the beginning of summer, Galatians chapter 2, Paul writes about this very trip he had. This very experience where that was in Acts, Luke's writing about what happened. And now Paul's like, all right, now let me tell you my experience, what I went through in that time. So he says, then after 14 years of missionary journeys, I went up again to Jerusalem, this time with Barnabas. So they're talking about the same exact trip. I took Titus along also. I went in response to a revelation, and meeting privately with those esteemed as leaders, I presented them the gospel that I preach among the Gentiles. So he's like, hey, listen, here's what I've been preaching. Here's what I heard from the Lord. Okay, let's compare notes. I just want to make sure I'm not teaching anything wrong and that we're teaching the same gospel. Okay, so I wanted to be sure I was not running and had not been running my race in vain. I want to make sure I'm not preaching the wrong gospel, and I don't want to be misleading people. Yet not even Titus, who was with me, was compelled to be circumcised, even though he was a Greek. This matter arose because some false believers had infiltrated our ranks. This is like, you can imagine him, he's just writing war language, right? They infiltrated our ranks to spy on the freedom we have in Christ Jesus and to make us slaves. He's like, they came to fight us. I mean, spiritually and theologically. So he continues, we did not give in to them for a moment. I mean, you almost hear just Paul like, we didn't give in once to what they were trying to teach, so that the truth of the gospel might be preserved for you. Paul talks specifically about this trip that he took to Jerusalem, to almost like the headquarters, like, all right, guys, let's talk about this issue. So Paul had been to Jerusalem many times. He started a number of his missionary journeys there. He went to this Jerusalem Council, as it was called, to talk specifically about this issue. So let's look. What is Jerusalem like? Okay, so if you go to Jerusalem, Jerusalem's a very large city, but then within Jerusalem is what's called the Old City. And this is the original Jerusalem, of which there's a wall around the entire thing, and there's a number of gates. Some are closed in, some are open that you can go through. Here is, so when you, depending on where you are, like you enter through a different gate, and when we say gate, like here's what the gate looks like when you walk up. This is one of many, many gates. And this wall, like you're not hopping that wall. And when you see gate, it's like, that's my buddy Drew. It's extremely thick. It's not just like, we'll just pop the lock and walk on through. No. This was Jerusalem was a heavily fortified city. If you remember throughout history, it would be conquered, and it was a very important site. So when you get to Jerusalem, you walk inside and you expect like, oh man, it's going to be awesome. Like people are going to be praying, and it's like a very holy. And then you realize, oh, they're all just trying to sell and make a buck, right? It's business. It like every street you go to. So you're walking, and we're like, okay, we're going to a site, and it's shops everywhere. And then you get to some places where you're going down a road, like one of these areas, and then it's these doors, and behind these doors are homes, like people live in them. And they're actually nice. Like if you go, like you can look at some of these. If you go on Airbnb and look up, places to stay in the old city, you can like rent out like places to stay. They're probably nicer than our homes, some of them. But this is like the road you go to. So you don't really take cars in there because it's this, right? So you're walking all these various like roads and avenues, and it's so easy to get lost. I think I've gotten lost every single time I get there. You just kind of ask people, where am I going? Like they direct you, like but it's big, and it's a maze, and it's like there's not really street signs. But then you get to a point where you go through a security gate, and then you walk to the Wailing Wall, the Western Wall. This is the holiest site especially for Orthodox Jews in Jerusalem. And here's what it looks like coming out. So you've been walking in all of these roads, and then you turn to the left, and here's the Temple Mount, and this is the wall. This is the only remaining actual. Here, let's get a closer look of the original wall that is left. The rest, in 70 AD, when the Romans destroyed the temple, they took most of it with them. And then this part is one of the only parts that survived. It goes down about another 30 feet underground. And this is the place, like when you think of the Wailing Wall, you hear about the Western, this is it. And there are guys, every single day, Orthodox Jews praying and reciting scripture and even singing at this. And, a lot of people will go and they'll pray, or they'll put notes. So you can go to the wall and you'll see, thousands of notes, prayer notes. I've done this too. And if you've been to Israel, I'm sure you've probably done this. And this is the spot. It's separated, males and females. So this is the male side, and then to the right, I don't know, I can't remember, it may have been that video, you'll see a wall that separates, and then on the other side is where the women have access to it. You have to wear a head covering. If you don't have one, they give you one, but so every single person has to have their head covered, because this is an extremely holy place. If you go to the left, so to the left of this, where this video is, you actually go inside to where the guys spend time, again, praying and reading. And they do this every day. Same guys. In fact, a lot of them, they don't have jobs. This is part of their religion, and they're subsidized by the government. Almost kind of like a welfare kind of experience. Or the wives, they'll be married and they have kids. The wives will work and take care of the kids while they study and pray and read. There's a whole library, I think, and maybe it's in here. There's a whole, to the left here, there's a whole library of rabbis and Jewish writings that they'll read. And then, this is awesome. You guys, we need to do this in Bend. Almost any day you go to Jerusalem, we're there on I think it's like a Sunday, I think, maybe. So this, can you guess what this is? Yeah, right? So they have bat mitzvahs and bar mitzvahs, and part of it is like you saw the guy in his suit, and they're just walking, and like the parents are so proud, and they're singing, like it's everywhere. Like you turn on the street and you're like, another one. This is awesome. And so you keep going, and then we found this too. I don't know, it was just like a super exciting day that day. We're like, just a concert. You're in Jerusalem. Like, I don't know if you can see the walls right there, and they just love life. Now, I don't know when the last time you partied like that. But I mean, it happens. It's honestly like you can't help but just enjoy and smile. And then to get out, you go through more shops. We made our way to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This is the traditional site. It's probably not the real site, but it's the traditional site that they, especially the Catholic Church, says that Jesus was crucified. And so the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is built on this spot. And then there's well, you'll see here. So you walk up to this Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Here's what you're going to see. As soon as you go in, that ladder's a pretty famous ladder, actually. It's there on purpose. It's not like a whoopsie. When you go in, there's a slab on the ground of stone. And this stone is said, the church says, is the stone that Jesus was laid on after he was crucified. So you'll see people bowing down to it, praying to it, kissing it. You see the lady on the left there? She bought a bunch of rosaries, and so she's blessing them by rubbing them on this stone. It's extremely religious, and the problem is, I think they said that stone was put there in like 300 to 400 years ago. So it's literally physically not possible to be the stone. It doesn't matter. The church said this is it. This is it. So you continue to go around, and then you come to the place, and there's a shrine here, and you got to wait in line to go see the spot. Again, supposedly that they say that this is where Jesus was crucified. And the whole thing is beautiful. The whole time, my buddy and I, Drew, he's a pastor as well at a church in California. He's just like, man, there's so many people here wanting to pay their respects to Jesus, but how many of them know him? Like how many of them are actually like followers of Jesus, and how much of this is just literally just purely religious? And here's another view of this shrine you wait hours to get in line for. Last time I went on this trip, I think we took a dozen or so of our church people, and a few of us went at like I think 5 or 6 in the morning before the people came, and it was awesome. There's no one in this place, and you can go everywhere. There's stairs that go downstairs into another area, and on as you go down the stairs, on both sides of the walls, there's crosses carved into it, and they're carved by crusaders who went in to get blessed, and they are literally have carved in, and there's hundreds of these little crosses carved in, all in this spot, and then. You got to leave, right? There again, there's the height of the walls in the city. And what do you know? More shops, right? You can get whatever you want here. All right, so Paul, he spends time in Jerusalem, has a lot of experience with Jerusalem. Now, one of the places I visited in Greece was Delphi, or Delphi it's pronounced. Delphi is not in Scripture except for one area, potential. Here's what we see. Paul's experience we think. Once when we were going to the place of prayer, we were met by a female slave who had a spirit by which she predicted the future. This is not a good translation. It literally says a spirit of Python. Now, we're going to see here in a second the site of Delphi, and Delphi was the home of the priestess Pythia, or Python. It was a religious sect only women could be it, and they were trained to read people's future, to be an oracle. So it's often referred to as the oracle at Delphi, or the oracle at Delphi, and they were called the Pythia. And so it's potential that when we read this, it says that a spirit of Python or spirit of Pythia, which is why they say a spirit by which she tried to predict the future, that she might have been a part of this group. So let's see how the story goes. She earned a great deal of money for her owners by fortune telling. Okay, so it's a good line of work. If you don't have a career picked out, think about it. She followed Paul and the rest of us, shouting, "These men are servants of the Most High God." Again, this is probably a priestess of this group, this oracle of Delphi. These men are servants of the Most High God who are telling you the way to be saved. She kept this up for many days, and then this is great. Finally, Paul became so annoyed, right? It took days, like the patience, and then he's like, okay, that's it. That he turned around and said to the spirit, in the name, and this is all it did, like 5 seconds to read. He could have done this on day one. In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to come out of her. At that moment, the spirit left her, right? Why'd you wait so long, Paul? When her owners realized that their hope of making money was gone, they seized Paul and Silas, dragged them into the marketplace to face the authorities. Then it says this, they brought them before the magistrates and said, these men are Jews and are throwing our city into an uproar by advocating customs and customs unlawful for us Romans to accept and practice. They got mad because they ruined their business. Like this was our lady. Now, this was probably a part of this group, right? Okay, so let's look at Delphi. Delphi is one of those places, if you go to Greece, like this is, I had a guy that I know that helps, like runs travel planning and helps set up tours all over the world. And so I called him like, hey, help me plan this thing because like I don't know where I'm going or what I'm doing. He's like, all right, if you're going to Greece, you have to go to Delphi. It's like, if you go there and don't go to this place, you're going to miss out. And I'm so glad he told me. So here's what it looks like. This is a map, okay? This is an artist rendering of what it looks like. In the middle is the temple dedicated to Apollo. Apollo's a big deal. And that's where the oracle lived and would do their readings. This is in the middle. This is in the middle of Greece up in the mountains. You'll get a view here in a second. It was referred to, they called it, this is kind of weird, Zeus's navel, belly button, because they thought it was literally the middle of the earth, like the middle of the world is this spot, right? There's a rock there that's like protruding, and it's called Zeus's belly button. It's odd. Here's a model of what this place would have looked like. This was for the wealthiest of the wealthiest. So to go and to live here and to be a part of this, this wasn't everyday people. Like this was the Newport Beach, the coastline, the Hollywood. This was if you have money and you are like this is where you go to live. Okay. While you're walking up there, you know what these are? You're going to see these everywhere. Shops, right? There's shops in Jerusalem today. They had shops here 4,000 years ago. Hey, listen, we got to make money here. We've got to sell some stuff. So, literally on your way in, there's shops. You eventually get to the place. This is the finance department. This is the treasury. This is where they're like, hey, I ran out of money, right? I spent all my money on the shops. I need a few more for sacrifices. All right, come on up here, just a slight fee. And then there's an amphitheater. They would do shows here. They would teach here. If you've been like overseas looking, like traveling, you see these there's amphitheaters everywhere, and it's shocking. Okay, now, again, this is probably maybe typical of if you've been to kind of ancient ruins before, until you see like the location of this. So it's backing up a mountain, and then you overlook where this place was built. This isn't just like down the street. So like all of these stones, everything that they used to build this, they had to either haul up here or find. And it's like, it is here's some more view. It's unbelievable. It took a few hours to drive there. I spent a whole day just to get here and see this and then go home. It was probably 2.5, 3 hours of driving each way because it's that remote. And they built this entire place. There you can see. So this is the temple ruins. This is where the oracle did her oracling. And people, this is a big deal. People from all over the world, all throughout the ancient world would come to this spot to have their future read, to know if they should go to war or not. Alexander the Great came here. All the Caesars came here. Here, I'll show you. They came to this spot. Again, more views of what it looked like. Okay, here it is. This is the ramp that you would walk up. The oracle will be right there. You got to pay a substantial amount of money, right? Just to get to this place, it costs you to travel there. You got to take caravans and people and supplies just to have your future read. Then there were times, this is great, where the oracle would say, you know what? I'm tired. Closing for the day. What? I was next in line. Well, we'll see you tomorrow. Like, oh man. So this is the spot. Right there, I went up to that spot. I tried to have my future read. I got nothing. She was asleep that day. This was Delphi. Okay, Paul never visited Delphi, but it was very much a reality. In his time, that there were people that were going there to get their futures read, and he, again, came across a lady that was probably a part of that. Okay, Paul's trip now. We left Jerusalem now. If you remember on all of his journeys, on his second and third missionary journey, he goes to Athens. Athens is a big deal, big place. Let's look at what happened in Athens. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with both Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace. We'll look at that here in a second. Day by day with those who happen to be there. Paul is preaching to anyone who's there. He's going to synagogues and he's going out in the marketplace. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate with him. Some of them asked, "What is this?" This is great. "What is this babbler trying to say?" Others remarked, "He seems to be advocating foreign gods." They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. They'd never heard this before, but they loved their gods. They had a lot of them. So if you showed up, said, "Hey, there's a new God, we need to know about it because we don't want to offend him. So please tell us about this new God." Then they took him and brought him into a meeting place of the Areopagus. Okay, this is, do you know what this is, the Areopagus? It's translated, that's the name of it. For us, you might know it as Mars Hill. It's the place. Referred to as Mars Hill, but it's called the Areopagus. Paul's going to preach there here in just a second. It's a super important, famous site, where they said to him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we would like to know what they mean." All right, this is great. First of all, how awesome would it be to have someone, like if you're sharing about Jesus and they're like, "Hey, you're bringing some strange things to our ears. Can you tell us more?" Like, "I've never met anyone like you." "Yes, please. Like, can we be friends?" All the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. Oh, man, if only people didn't do that today. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus, and he said this, and this is his famous words that Paul's going to preach. "People of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription." This is so good. "To an unknown God." Like, we built an altar, and if in case there's a God we're forgetting, it's for you. If we don't even know who you are, we built you an idol. "So," he says, "you are ignorant of the very thing you worship. And this is what I'm going to proclaim to you." And then he goes on to preach about Jesus, and he says, "Let me tell you about this unknown God." All right, so Paul spent time in Athens. He spent time specifically in the Areopagus in Mars Hill. So let's look at what Athens is like, what it is like today, but we're going to look at the ruins of what still stands. All right, so first to get there, you go to this thing called the Acropolis. The Acropolis are these sites built on this huge hill in the middle of town. So like, we have Pilot Butte, right? It's nothing compared to this, but it's like that. It's probably the closest thing we can think of. So in Bend, wherever you are, you can look and I kind of see Pilot Butte, like, oh, there it is. I know where okay. The Acropolis is that. You got to walk uphill. I don't know if you know that all of Israel's uphill. I found out all of Greece is uphill too. Like, everything is uphill. And on your way, you're still going uphill. And what do you know? Another amphitheater, right? Because they built them everywhere. And what an incredible view. We're only halfway up, okay? Oh, look, more. I recorded a lot of me going up. I guess probably because I'm like, I want everyone to know just how like difficult this whole trip was. Okay, so you finally get to the stairs and you're going to enter. This is all original. So you can imagine in its prime like how impressive this was. Okay, Paul absolutely walked through this entrance, through this area. Okay, you keep going and then you get to, these columns. It's hard to put into perspective just how big this is. And the fact that they built this thousands of years ago. Okay, you come into the kind of the flat area of the top of the Acropolis. To the left is this. This is dedicated to the god of victory and war, Nike. Nike has been there for thousands of years. Like Nike, they're everywhere, right? And then to the right, you see, this is the structure. This is the largest certainly in Greece. This is the most important, the Parthenon. And this is where they dedicated to all of the gods. They built this, and this is, this structure, like whatever you looked at before, you think, oh, that's big. This is larger. I think this is 2.5 larger than any other version or structure similar to this. This is the epicenter of Athens. Probably maybe you could say of Greece, and it is that important to them. It's even that important now. At night, they have this lit up. So again, anywhere in the city, you can see it, and it's beautiful and it's lit up. So the driver who was driving around said that they actually have city statutes that you can't build a structure taller than this, because they want you to see it from anywhere in the city. So there's no other place in Athens that is allowed to be larger or taller than this. Paul would have visited this for sure. There's no way he would have looked at this and said, nah, I'll skip it. So Paul's up here probably in the marketplace, going place to place. The actual marketplace is down the mountain, and you can go to the ruins and see that. But he would have gone here because right on the other side of this, so you go back down and you come to this hill. It's just rocks now. That is Greek. That's what Greek looks like. That is the dictation of Paul's sermon that he gave at Mars Hill. And this is Mars Hill. This is what it looks like right now. There's not much left of it. On top of this was a structure, and there was an entire area built. And this is where they exchanged ideas. So when it says he reasoned with the Greeks and he persuaded them, it was literally on this spot. And then he preaches this sermon to an unknown God. All right, let me tell you about this unknown God. And it's weird being there because it's just this mound right now. But to think like Paul's preaching Jesus to Athens for the first time. When you think of Athens and the history of Athens, and he brings Jesus to this place right here. Like this is the first time they're hearing about this new teaching in Athens. It's incredible. Okay. There's so much more in Athens and other even non-biblical sites that you go and visit. But I also went to this place. Athens was great, but this is cool. Paul then goes to Corinth. Corinth is just it was about a 90-minute drive from Athens. So for him that's a walk. He spent 1.5 years in Corinth, from AD 50 to 52-ish. He writes a lot while he's there. He writes 1st and 2nd Thessalonians while he's here. 1st and 2nd Thessalonians are probably the earliest letters, probably the first 2 letters he wrote. 1st Thessalonians, at least, is probably the first letter he wrote. He writes 1st and 2nd Corinthians to this church. He doesn't write it while he's here, but this is the place that obviously he sets up the church in Corinth, and then he's going to write to them. By the way, they didn't do such a great job as a church. If you read 1st and 2nd Corinthians, it's all about him correcting them and what's wrong with you guys? What is wrong with you? I won't even get it. Some of it's it's very PG, maybe PG-13, some of the stuff. And it's okay, they have problems because, and there's a reason. And he writes Romans here. Probably the greatest theological book or letter or document in the New Testament, in the Bible, he writes while he's in Corinth. Okay, so let's look at what happened while he was in Corinth. After this, Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. There he met a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla because Claudius had ordered all the Jews to leave. All right. Paul went to see them, and because he was a tent maker as they were, he stayed and worked with them. So hey, can I join you? Yeah, all right, let's get to work. Every Sabbath, he reasoned in the synagogue, trying to persuade the Jews and Greeks. When Silas and Timothy came from Macedonia, Paul devoted himself exclusively to preaching, testifying to the Jews that Jesus was the Messiah. Okay, this is important. But when they opposed Paul, all in Corinth, and became abusive, this is great. He shook out his clothes in protest and said to them, I'm going to start doing this, by the way. This is like a pretty awesome, like, the kids started arguing. All right, you know what? He shook out his clothes in protest and said to them, your blood be on your own heads. I won't say that to my kids. I am innocent of it. From now on, he says, I will go to the Gentiles. And then he goes to the place that I got to visit, like where the Gentiles were. So, what was Corinth like? Here's what we see. We're going to see that in a second. All right. First, when you're driving there, there's the Corinthian Canal. This is incredible. This was not in Paul's day. This is just like a tourist site. It's probably call it a tourist trap. They carved this into the stone. This is one big area. They carved this with dynamite. Took them hundreds of years because they started, couldn't do it, stopped, started, couldn't do it, stopped, finally got dynamite, and then and then blew this hook to make this canal to connect these two seas. And now you can just have your boat. You can drive right through it. It's actually pretty incredible. Like you're standing over there, and there's people in there, like, first of all, in their yacht, like, okay, all right, we get it. And they're like waving and stuff. Like it's a pretty fun little sight. Okay, this is nothing biblical other than just like, it's incredible. You probably, maybe if you Google it, you can find like cruise ships trying to squeeze through there. It's like, it's pretty awesome. There's one place we went to. This was a church, an Orthodox church dedicated to Paul. The Catholic Church built this. It's beautiful. We were the only people in it. And there's like 4 of us on, like, all traveling together, and it's just us in this entire church, built in honor of Paul in Corinth. This was the icon setup, and the driver that I'm with is a believer, and I said, like, oh, are you Catholic? He's like, oh no, I'm Orthodox. Okay, and it's a big difference. But he went up to this, did the sign of the cross, kneeled down to it, and I'm like, wow, okay, that's real. And then you come out of this church and you see this mound, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And he's like, oh, but yeah, we're gonna go there. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And I'm like, oh, we're gonna drive there? That's not the theme of my trip, driving places. So we drive to the bottom of it, and he's like, all right, you're gonna go up to the top. And I'm like, okay, you're gonna show us the way. He's like, oh, no, I'm staying with the car. I'm like, okay, man, like, all right, how far can this be? So we start traveling. We go up to another. I'm like, okay, this has got to be it. Like, oh man, I'm not even at the entrance yet. And so we keep going. And this is incredible. So this is the Corinthian Acropolis, and it became like a fort, a fortified area that would be used to. You'll see why here in a second. As in defense of all of Corinth. And it was I think originally built by Muslims who conquered this area, and then when they were driven out, it was by Christians, and then eventually, like, Christians got away and ran away from persecution and lived up here. They lived in this place, like believers, you and I, like, were persecuted for our faith, and they go and they live up here, which was just unbelievable to me because of. So all right, I don't know if you can hear that.
Let's do it.
Yeah, that's. Motivated myself to just keep going. I'm like, I got to be close to the top. And then I get to this spot, and they're like, okay, now you've made it inside, but you're going to keep going, and I got to go to the top. I'm going to that. That's the goal. And the other 2 guys I was with, they said, no, hey, man, you're on your own. Cool. Like, we've gone far enough. I'm like, well, I'm here. I'm doing it. So I keep going, and eventually, like, okay, these are some of the greatest sights probably in Greece, because from this you can see a 360-degree view of everything, which is why it was a fort. So I finally made it. What was that? 15, 20 seconds? You guys, that took me an hour and a half to get to you're welcome. So I did the work for you. So I finally get to this place, and I'm like, I made it. And there's like other people there. They're like, oh, how much further? I'm like, man, we made it. And they're like, okay, it wasn't worth it. So I go to this thing, and I'm like, I'm going up those stairs. Those aren't original stairs. And then I finally make it to the top, like the reason you go here, and it's like, okay, I get it. I get it. And you see all of current day Corinth, and you see the sea. I mean, it's like, it's unbelievable. And it goes all the way around. So this was the lookout spot. This is where you could see anyone invading Greece from any direction. That's why this became so fought after, because of how important it was. So Paul didn't visit this, but it surely existed in his time. Okay, now let's look at the place where Paul went. First, so in ancient Corinth, these are statues that they found of Romans, and whether they're wealthy or politicians. And you'll see this, that they don't have their heads, which is, it's different. And they're burned. Here, let me show that again. You'll see this maybe on some of them. See how they're black? Okay, so these were usually made in two pieces. So they made a statue and then they put the head on separate. And then what they would do is sometimes if someone paid a little bit more, they'd like make your head and swap it. Like instead of redoing the whole thing, you could just swap out the heads. So they were very easy to lose. But also, these became, when Rome fell, centuries later, so centuries after Paul, those who ended up taking over destroyed them, right? I mean, these were the Romans. We need to ruin them, and especially their statues and their idols. And then what happened is some Christians came in, and in their desire to worship only God, they said, we're going to burn them because we can't have false idols set up. So they're scarred from Christians actually saying like, no, we need to remove this as best we can, right? And then these get buried in rubble, and then, archaeologists find them and put them back together. But so they're all destroyed. To find an actual like full statue is so rare. All right, so here's ancient Corinth now. They too had a temple, much smaller than any of the other places. But this was the center of their worship of the gods. And so this is Paul 1,000% went there. As you walk,
these are various shops.
Yeah. What do you know? More shops.
That would have been buzzing.
More shops.
In Paul's time.
Sweet commentary. That guy sounds.
Jewelry, pottery.
That guy's smart.
Animals for sacrifice.
Really so this is.
All of it dedicated.
I thought I muted it. Oh, yeah.
In service too.
So this is what remains of ancient Corinth, where Paul went. Here's another view of what it looked like, and we're getting to a really important place. It's not large. Ancient Corinth is not large. In fact, none of these places are extremely large, but they're very significant, and because of what happened there. And then you come to this place. This is referred to as the Bema, or the public square. When it said that Paul left the Jews and said, "Fine, I'm going to go to the Gentiles," this is the spot he preached. This little, not really a church, not a synagogue, none of those existed in this area, but this was like the public square. This is where you go to share new ideas. And so they had this built, and so Paul goes there and he preaches for a year and a half. I mean, every chance he has at this spot. This is 2 Corinthians 4:17. I don't know if you can read what it says. Let me show you. For this slight momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. That's etched right there. Paul, here's another view of what it looked like kind of from the side. Paul, the guy who wrote half of the New Testament, spent time, like it's weird being in this spot and being like this, like he stood right here. Like he stood and preached right here. Here's a Roman road dating back to Paul's time. This is what it looked like. Again, what's on the left there? Shops, more shops, right? Everywhere you go, shops. Shopping, like we didn't invent shopping when we built malls. Like shopping's been around. This road is 2,000 years old. This is the road Paul would have walked in and out on. And here they are. Shops along the way to buy whatever you can. All right. The last site. Paul spent some time in Rome. So his last trip he takes is to Rome. It's not a missionary journey. He's arrested and is taken to Rome to await his sentence and eventually will be killed. Here's what we read. Acts 28, the last chapter of Acts, the very end of the kind of the biography of the early church. Here's what he says. There we found brethren, and we were invited to stay with them for 7 days. And so we came to Rome. And the brethren there, when they heard of us, came as far as the Forum of Appius, and this is great, and 3 taverns. Doesn't that sound like very like Lord of the Rings, like Tolkien? Like, oh wow, okay, then 3 taverns to meet us. On seeing them, Paul thanked God and took courage. And when he came into Rome, Paul was allowed to stay by himself with the soldier that guarded him. He was on house arrest. He would write from Rome, got people, for the end of Acts 28, you see people come and visit him, and you see him just spending his time, kind of his final days, saying his final goodbyes before he would eventually be killed. So what does Rome look like? Now, Rome today is busy and vibrant, and to get into it, you go over this. This is like the Tiber River. This is, it's the river's not so great. It's like, okay, you could do a better job upkeeping it a little bit. But like crossing it over, I mean, this is a famous river and to some famous sites. And you come to this place that is, it's not square footage wise, it's not large. Like, it's maybe a couple blocks like of our blocks. But in this is the Roman Forum, which was the marketplace. It's where Romans went every day for, ready? Shopping. It was referred to as Palatine Hill. This is where the emperor's house was, or eventually became Caesar's. We'll look at it here in a second. It's unbelievable. And then behind us is the main event that we'll look at here in a second. But to get in is this, the archway. These are all over the place. I mean, this is enormous. And they built this in honor of victories. They would come home after battles, they'd conquer someone, and they say, you know what? We're going to build an archway commemorating our victory. And inside of it is paintings and carvings depicting the battles and what they had and how they had won. And so you walk through this, and it's awe-inspiring. You walk through this, and you see the might and power of Rome. In its heyday, right? Rome was the greatest empire in the world, and the Roman Empire. And Rome, its capital, was it. I mean, it was the place to be. In all of the world, this was the greatest place. Okay, this is the emperor's home. It didn't have those bars. This is huge, and it is impressive, and it was here. You can see it's multiple stories. You can imagine what this would have been like, covered in stone, and everything was covered in marble originally, so it was brilliant white, and it had hundreds and hundreds of rooms. It was a palace. Look at this, okay? It even had underground parking for their chariots, private garage, right? Normal Roman citizens, you don't get this. But when you're the boss, when you literally rule the world, they'll build you whatever you want. Hey, my horses like shade. All right? We'll build them. We'll build an underground entrance where you can come and go and no one can see you leave. And then on top of it is a garden. And they had this garden that they still, that's not original, by the way. But they still tend to it and keep it nice. And it's unbelievable that this was built for one family. One family, right? Whoever was in charge, the emperor eventually became Caesar's. Like, this is where they lived. From this, like, no one got to come here except them. You can see the whole forum. So down below, this is all marketplace. So you walk through the arch here, and you come through, and there's shops, and there's the courthouse is over here. And this was the center of all things Rome. Here's some more views. And the reason it was built here is so that the emperor could see everything that's happening. I'm watching you guys, just so you know. I'm watching you. I can see everything that's going on. If there's an uprising starting, we can see it, we can stop it. Isn't that incredible? And then you see, of course, all of none of those buildings are original, by the way. And it's amazing. Here it is again. And then to leave, you go on this Roman road. It's original, it's 2,000 years old, and it leads to the main event. Ready? Here it is. This. I don't know if you've ever been there. If you've been to Rome, you've been to the Colosseum. There's no way you missed this. So I went to the Colosseum twice when I was there because once was not enough. So you go to the Coliseum. I went once in the evening, and then the second day I got to go. It was awesome. I got to go underground. I'll show you what it looks like, where the gladiators were. So you enter in the Coliseum, and it's of all the things you visit, this is the most impressive structure. It's hard to even imagine. It's hard to fathom the size of it. It took them 9 years to build from beginning to end. It was in use for a few hundred years, and then it was abandoned, which is, they don't even know like what exactly happened. It just stopped getting used. When you enter in, the Catholics dedicate this as a holy site because of all of the martyrs that were killed here. So you enter in and there's a cross, literally right at the entrance. I knew about this. I mean, it's all amazing. There's another thing at the end I didn't know about that I'll show you here in a second, that I was like, that is shocking and incredible. So here's what it looks like, okay? So you're traveling, you're here to see the shows. It wasn't uncommon that the Roman emperors would put on 100 days of games. You guys have seen the movie Gladiator, I'm sure, right? You probably know. So like you see maybe what it would have been like in that day. And they would do, I think they even talk about it, that the new emperor was doing 100 days of games, and so they need new gladiators to go fight because, you go through gladiators pretty quick, right? When it's every day. And so you get your ticket. Now here's what's amazing. So they built this entire structure. This thing is huge. And they didn't charge to get in. It's free. It could fit 80,000 people on any given time. I think they said that they could get everyone in and seated within 20 minutes. Everyone got, just like we have today, here's your section, here's your row, here's your seat. You got the same thing. Here's your section. Here's what a section would look like. You're going to go to find your row, and then you're going to find your seat. It was based on your level of importance. So the slaves and the commoners would be up top. Women are the very, very top. It was abysmal. Like some of the stories are shared about like their experiences. There'd be pregnant women who would be up here and go into labor, and it was too far to go down to go to your home for a home birth, and you can't miss the games. So they would give birth in the Coliseum, right up here. It's awesome. Where were you born? Oh man, right in the middle of a lion attack. It was pretty cool. Here's the arena floor. So this is the ground level now. Now we're getting a view of where royalty would sit. They are close, and you can only be in this place if you were a politician, if you were part of the Roman leadership. Certainly the emperor or the Caesar would be here. Here's another view. I mean, it's incredible when it works. Reconnecting. Did it freeze? Oh yeah. Okay, let me describe. All right. Here's what's crazy. You'll see this in a second. They have trap doors where animals would enter, and they would do it like magic. So they'd have this trap door that would open. The whole thing's covered in dirt and dust and sand for a few reasons. Think of it like a giant kitty litter box, right? I mean, they have animals, right? So all right, when animals do what animals do, and so you got to have a lot of sand, and it helps absorb all the blood. They can just sort of move it around. All right, there we go. So they had these trap doors that would open. A puff of dust would cover the area, and then all of a sudden, a rhino would show up, and you've never seen a rhino before. I mean, they're magicians. How are they? Our Caesar loves us. Look what he's doing. Look at these incredible. I mean, it was like a production. What they would do is they had, for this to work, they had 5,000 every day, 5,000 slaves to run this. And it was their job to do whatever the emperor wanted, whatever the Caesar wanted. If he says, you know what? Hey, I want to see a lion take on I want to see, 2 lions take on a giraffe. All right. And within 5 minutes, they got to make it happen. So they just had a whole elaborate system of how we're going to get, all right, we got to get the giraffe out and we got to get the lions at the same time. We got to make sure, and all of it is choreographed. I mean, it's incredible. So, okay, here's what it looked like from a gladiator's perspective. This is what you see, right? It goes up here. All seats, all fans, all cheering. I mean, it's a modern day, like a modern day arena, like a football stadium when you're looking up and it's every 80,000 people are cheering for you. That's what it was like. But here's what is now like what the gladiators experienced. This is now underground. You don't, like when you go to the Coliseum, you got to get tickets, but this is like a separate ticket to get down below because like, it's VIP, guys, really. And so, I showed up and they're like, you, sir, you belong down below. I'm like, okay. Yeah, is that a good thing you just said? Okay, so you go down below. Here's one of the pulley systems that they recreated, what it would have looked like. And they have guys pulling this, and this giant pulley system would lift a hippo, an alligator. They would go all over the world, catch these creatures, and then bring them back just for the games. They would always start. Here's some more views of what it looks like. This is what the gladiators would have. Now we're underground. The arena's up top, and you can hear the thunder, and you can hear, people, animals being killed, and gladiators fighting, and you're like, your name gets called, and you're like, all right, here we go. And this is the path you take. Here's another view of like, okay, we're underground, on our way, maybe for literally to our death. And this is, again, it's all covered. Okay, watch your heads. I got a little close here. Watch out. Whoa. It's honestly, it's unbelievable thinking of what happened. Like you're down below and you're in these areas and you're just thinking, how many people, how many gladiators or slaves or Christians who were killed for their faith in this spot? They would always start with animals. Here's another view of what gladiators you would have gone through those. You would have gone up, lifted up into the arena, and then you see this. And they're all chanting for you to win, hopefully win. Maybe you don't. They would always start with this is great. This is what they shared. They always start with the animals, and it would be animals versus animals, and then it would be humans versus animals, and they'd kill. And then they'd have an intermission, lunchtime, right about lunchtime. You know what they did? All the animals that they just killed, it's food. And they'd throw them up to the stands. Like, here you go. You get, alligator leg, and you get, tiger snout, and they would literally just like give. And this is great. They would bring little things to create little fires, and they would cook them right there, a little cookout, right? It's lunchtime. We're not going to leave and go back. We're here. We got our seats, right? We're not going to miss this. So they would cook up their food, make their lunch, and then, lunchtime's over. All right, now let's get to the main event. And then the gladiators show up every day. So to think about this, the production level that would go into this for one day, let alone 100 straight days, is unbelievable. Say, this is the gate. We're on our way out now. This is called the gate of death because everything that died went out this gate. Was removed. So the gladiators who were killed, you go through this gate. Anyone who didn't, criminals, you go through this gate. They would have executions every day, all of them sent through this gate. And then our guide, I'm pretty sure he's not a believer. He mentions this on our way out, and he says, "Oh yeah, there's a lot of places in the Coliseum. They'll do carvings and mosaics of places that they've been. And so here's just one real quick." And everyone just, "Oh, okay, cool," and walks through. And I'm like, what? What is that? I was just there. Look at this. You're walking out. You see this? Maybe you don't recognize what this is. You see at the bottom left there, the 3 crosses? The Romans had been to Jerusalem and recognized how incredible it was that they put a mosaic of it on the Colosseum. And they even recognized the crucifixions that happened outside of it. And there just so happens to be 3 of them. Isn't that interesting? So I'm walking through this, and this is up. You can kind of barely see it. Here's maybe a closer photo. And they're all just walking through it, and I'm looking at this going, man, I'm in Rome, nowhere even close to Jerusalem, and like the cross has an influence here still. Like for them, it was a big enough deal to know what happens in Jerusalem, what it looks like that, hey, you know what? Put that in a part of the Colosseum. This is like putting up some fine art, and this is important. Isn't that incredible, right? So Paul goes to Rome. The Colosseum was built after him. He never experienced that, but he did experience. He certainly saw the marketplace and the forum and the emperor's palace and would have preached there. And eventually he loses his life here. All right. After Rome, I got on a plane and I came home and I went to bed. Oh, it was great. It was great. Paul's trip ended in Rome, and it was even leaving. It was Rome was my favorite place. Rome was incredible. If you've ever been there, Italy was great. I didn't put this picture on there. I should have. Man, the pizza. I don't know if you've had Italian food in Italy. It's different. Like they do. Somehow they got flavor crystals of some kind, and it's different, and it was amazing. So I got this experience. This is just but a taste of what Paul did. You can follow the footsteps of Paul and stuff. But this was my trip. It was amazing. It was humbling. It was hard to like think about, like, man, what life would have been like thousands of years ago. It was incredible to think of the amount of miles Paul put on, like having I just did 50 miles and I'm coming off that. So I'm still like, man, I'm still a little like, I mean, it's a good thing I'm in great shape. Otherwise I'd be really bad. But I'm thinking like, man, you did thousands of miles, tens of thousands of miles to preach the gospel, to eventually die in this place. Not a hero's death, just as a prisoner, someone arrested for their faith. Whatever struggles we have, Paul would say, hey, I'm not going to say those aren't like, that's not a struggle, but what he did for the gospel, the fact that you and I have this in our hands comes at so much sacrifice. So I came home having a renewed appreciation for even just reading through it and thinking of like the places where it, like what it would have been like, and it was incredible. So next year we hope to go, and I hope you go. I mean, we might be hard to take all of you, but if you've never been to Israel, and I've had people like on this last trip that we went with that were like, yeah, we wanted to go, but we just put it off, and finally we made it. And both of them said, man, we should have come a long time ago, because it really is. How many of you have been to Israel? You've gone on a trip? Yeah? Awesome. All right. This side of the room, okay, so you guys, you're done. You don't get to go. All right, this side, we got to get you there. It is, for me at least, it is incredible, and it brings, like what you read here in black and white, it brings to life, and it brings and puts in color, and you're like, I was there. I know what it was like. So if, just again, shameless plug for a trip we haven't even planned yet. If you at all are ever thinking about, maybe we should go, all right, next year is your year. The Lord told me. All right, let's pray.